First, I'd like to thank Rainbow and Adam for hosting this. It's very nice of them. I think it's a great idea. When we come together like this and, share our knowledge with each other and stuff. The way this came about, a few of you have been asking me how this came about and also asking me what my personal history is related to this. So rather than say it 3 or 4 times, I said I'm going to wait until I start.
Turn off the radio.
What? Okay, so can you hear me? Yeah. Louis, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. First of all, does everybody know everybody else? Most of you Jamestown folks know. You guys know my Israeli family?
More or less.
Yotam, Elian, Yoam. You guys know Emmanuel and Sue, right? And George and Barbara. So we're all one big happy family. If you have any questions on any Hebrew words that I say, which I'll pronounce improperly, they're here to correct me. So the way this came about is many of you know that I teach meditation up in the Bar K. I'm the education director of the Unifying Meditation Institute, which started back east when Emmanuel and I lived in New York. And started teaching meditation there. So I started meditating when I was 16 years old, a junior in high school. And I started meditating with the TM practice, Transcendental Meditation, which was Maharishi's brand of meditation, right? So from my very first meditation, I fell in love with meditation. So I sort of went into it with my whole being. And I went to various advanced courses, and I heard Maharishi was teaching a summer course at Queen's College in Canada, so I went there, spent the summer there, and I loved it. And then he invited me to come to Spain to learn how to become a teacher of meditation. So I went from Queen's College in Canada to Spain for a 4-month training course. However, so this connects with me and who I am, Julia, with the meditation piece. While I was there, we were learning some practices as teachers that were Vedic practices that honor Vedic masters and various Vedic gods from their tradition, which is really a beautiful ceremony when taken out of space. However, my upbringing, I'm a Greek, Italian, Spanish Jew. Now, in the history of all of that, there's a story about Spanish Jews and the Inquisition, and Jews converting forcibly to Catholicism, where they faced death or conversion, right? So one of the unique things about the organized religion that is Judaism is it's the oldest monotheistic religion. So a big thing for Jews is that there's only one God. And that you don't bow down or kneel down or worship any other God. Sort of a core principle. So I'm with Maharishi, and there's these things, even though I wasn't raised in any kind of structured Judaism at all, it was still sort of a thing that made me feel uncomfortable. So in speaking to him, I said, can I be a teacher without doing this? And he said, no, but explore your own tradition. And then you'll learn your tradition of meditation that resonates with you. And that I did. I came back from Spain, I studied with various teachers of Jewish mysticism, it's commonly called Kabbalah. And I learned a lot. One thing I learned was the goals of these traditions are basically the same. So what I was learning from Maharishi, the Kabbalistic masters, the goal was the same. This goal of realizing the higher self, the divine within us, was the same in the Vedic tradition as it was in the Hebrew tradition. So I eventually started learning more and more. I went to Israel. A lot of good things happened. And then I came back and I started teaching, and Emmanuel became one of my students. And then he decided that it would be good if we started a not-for-profit to sustain this teaching because many people were learning, and that's how UMI came into being. So that's a little background on me and how I got to this place. I want to be very clear, though, because this is about the history of Judaism and Jewish mysticism. What we teach in UMI is not a religion. By no means do you have. Most of our students are not Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish to learn this meditation, nor does it suddenly make you Jewish when you start learning it. Funny story is, the big deal for Jewish people is Friday night, Kabbalah Shabbat it's called. You have a dinner. This is one of the traditions my wife and I chose to keep. So throughout our kids' lives, they were raised with a Friday night special deal. And we have a special meal. She likes the candles, and we have challah, and we have a nice family meal. So it's great. It's a good thing. Anyway, one of my daughter's cousins, I guess my niece, brought her boyfriend to this Kabbalah Shabbat dinner. And we're passing out the challah. So you say a blessing over the challah, it gets passed out, and it gets to him, and he's nervous about putting it in his mouth. So my daughter Raquel, who was like 4 at the time, said, "Don't worry, you won't make you Jewish." So I want to say, don't worry. If you're whatever religion you are, and I believe from the bottom of my heart, whatever, if you're an atheist or a Buddhist or meditation only can enlighten and enliven those things within you, whatever religion it is, and that's what we do at UMI. We teach that. But it does use Hebrew letters, and it does come from what we call the Semitic tradition. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what does that mean, Semitic tradition. And in doing that, we'll have a good look at the history of Israel, Judaism, Semitic traditions. Now this is challenging for me because this is a diverse group of people. It's a short period of time. There's no way, I mean, you could spend a year on this stuff. It's challenging in and of itself because what is the history? I mean, to say history, there's an issue right there because we're not dealing with necessarily historical facts. So here's the first question I put to you, to ponder through this. Some of this is actual history. And how can I say that? Because archaeologically, they've dug up some stuff that shows that, you know, you can go to Israel today, and there is the western wall of the temple. So obviously there was a temple. So David's temple, Solomon's temple, and Herod's temple, they actually existed. There's the city of David. There's the Dead Sea Scrolls, which has a whole Torah portion in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So those things actually existed. And then there's plenty of stuff that I'm going to be talking about that there's no way that historically you could say there's evidence to these things. So what I'm suggesting is that there's possibility that there's a combination of real history and allegory or metaphor. Just like in the Far Eastern tradition, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, right? So if you know that there was this big war and Krishna tutored Arjuna. We don't know if that war ever existed. But when we look at it in tradition as meditators, we look at it like, or anyone seeking higher consciousness, we look at it as a metaphor for us to learn something about growing our consciousness, about being a better human being, right? So when we look at this history, that history, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the Far East, comes from the Veda. The history I'm talking about tonight comes from the Torah, which is an ancient book. And the Torah, so in this culture, in this Western culture, we're familiar with these things. because, quote unquote, is this Western culture comes from the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? Judeo-Christian. So it's most of us in the West are of that tradition. So Christianity came from Judaism, right? I mean, Jesus was a Jew. In fact, if you called him Jesus back in the day, he wouldn't turn around. Jesus is not a Hebrew name, it was not his name. His formal name was Yehoshua. And, that's like Robert for me. Yeshua would be like Rob for me. And like Yeshua would be Bob. So any one of those names you would immediately recognize. If he in fact existed, I believe he did. But I'm just saying, I don't know from archaeological facts what is absolute history and what is allegory for us at this point. So going further back, so what is the Torah? Does anybody know what the Torah is? Okay. All right, so that's good. Sacred Scroll, first 5 books of the Old Testament. All right, so Jews don't like to say Old Testament because it makes it sound like the old stuff, and the Christians got the new stuff, and we got the old stuff. It doesn't sound good. So we say the Torah, and the whole Old Testament we call the Tanakh. So that includes the Torah. It's actually an acronym. That includes the Torah, the prophets, and what we call the writings, so the other stuff. So that goes from Genesis all the way to Malachi, right? We call Genesis Bereshit. So there's Hebrew names for each of the first 5 books. But the real Holy Grail in Judaism is the Torah, the first 5 books. So where does this come from? What do we know about the Torah? And also, it's part of the Christian Bible. So all of this evolved over time. So whether you're a Christian or Jew, or whatever you are, I hope that you can get something out of this talk. And again, I can't overemphasize, if you want to come and meditate, none of this really matters in that sense. What I'm going to suggest is that the mysticism that is in the tradition of our meditation predates Judaism. It predates any organized religion. It was not an organized religion when it started. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the patriarchs of the Jewish people, right? If you would have called them Jews, they wouldn't recognize what you were talking about. They weren't Jews. They didn't know the term didn't exist when they lived, if they lived. So the Torah, the oldest Torah we have, full-length Torah, is 800 years old. So how old it is and how it exactly came into being, we can't exactly know for sure. As I said, older than that, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's the book of Leviticus in its entirety. So we know it's certainly a heck of a lot older than 800 years old, and they think, even the critics of the Torah think it's probably at least 1,500 years old. As Jews, Orthodox Jews or religious Jews, believe that Moses wrote the Torah, all 5 books, and that he received this revelation on Mount Sinai. You've all seen the story, right? The 10 Commandments, the tablets. He comes down and breaks the tablets. Who did that in the movie? So there is that. What I'm saying, so we're going to follow 2 parallel lines. One is what's generally believed within Judaism, with some historical evidence and a whole lot of no historical evidence. And also a mystical line, where what the people of, I would say, the Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism believe. I'm never going to get through this in one night. I don't want to, and I don't think you want me to either. So what I decided we'll do is we'll break it up into at least 3 sections. I hope to get to Jacob tonight. If not, we'll just do it the next time, after the holidays or something. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, one of the really confusing things for me all along with this is timeline. Timeline to begin with is hard because there's no real way of saying, okay, Abraham was born on this date, because there's differences of opinion by scholars. But to complicate the matter, the calendars are different. So we use, and is mostly used now, what's called the Gregorian calendar, right? But that's based on Jesus. So in the Jewish calendar, we go from the time of creation, which is a calendar they call AM. So there's the Latin piece of this that I'm not going to bring into it. But in Latin, AD doesn't mean after the death, but it means the year of our Lord. The year of our Lord Jesus, right? So we don't necessarily use that. So what Jews will use is either the original Hebrew calendar, which just dates from 0, like now, this year is 5738. Okay? So we're 5,738 years from creation. Now, most Jews today, even Orthodox Jews, they're not so rigid about these things. So there's nobody, I'd say nobody, most Orthodox Jews, and I'm nowhere near an Orthodox Jew, don't believe that the world was created in less than 6,000 years. What the belief is that the Adamic era came into being at that time. And the story of creation in Bereshit, in Genesis, is a story that has eras itself within it. So when it says, and God said, let there be light, it's not a day as it's described in this translation. That could be a period of 1,000,000 years or 100 million years. And then let there be waters and divisions between the waters and luminaries. And finally, Adam comes along and creates the myrrh. There you go. So there's all of these things, that I just want to make sure is clear in this. So I can throw out something. So now we have the confusion of what do we use? CE is the common era that Jews will use. Instead of saying BC or AD, they'll say this is the common era, which is CE. And CE and AD match up, which is kind of nice. When you get to BC, it's weird because the numbers are going up in one way and down in the other way. And I have not a mathematical mind, and I get very confused by it. So let's jump ahead. We have the creation story, the first chapter of the first book of Genesis, right? So in that, in the Torah, the word for God is called Elohim. Now, Elohim is used there, and then a few chapters later, what's used is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or Yahweh, right? Now, some scholars say that this indicates there were multiple writers of this book. I would say that my teachers of Jewish mysticism would think differently in that there's not just 2 different names for God in Jewish mysticism. There's multiple names. And the reason there's multiple names is because it's defining that particular energy in creation, right? So Elohim, in the beginning, is describing the divine power of creating in nature that still goes on in nature. No Jewish mystic believes that it was just bang, boom, and everything was created. Creation keeps going on. Right this moment, creation is going on. There's probably millions of cells in our body that right now are dying and are coming back to life. All right? So, here's Adam and Eve. So I'm not going to go really wide with this, because that would take way more than 3 lessons. But I'm going to go a little deep. So I'd rather go deep than wide. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So we have Adam and Eve on the picture. I'm going to get really into that. And Adam and Eve have sons, and who are they? Cain and Abel, right? So then, and I'm going to say there was likely other people on the planet at this time. But I don't know that for sure. No one knows. But there's a dispute between Cain and Abel. Who wins that dispute? Cain. So anyway, the story goes that the land becomes multiplied, right? And then what happens is more and more people, more and more problems, people don't get along, people worship idols. There's a flood. We know the flood. The flood, interestingly enough, is in a lot of other traditions, not just the Semitic tradition. Now this flood. Noah gets his people, 2 by 2, get on a boat. Now here again, when I started the conversation, I talked about metaphor and allegory, right? It's likely, and when you begin to study the mystical meanings behind these things, it's really enlightening and amazing. And I say that because you start to look at the story, and then you look at the Hebrew letters, and you look at the numerical values of names and letters, and what they mean. It's called gematria. And you realize the story is about consciousness. I mean, even think of the story of the slaves, the Hebrew slaves in Egypt, passing through the Red Sea, and Hamas. And all this story has got to do with the redemption of our own selves, from our own mental slavery, as well as historical slavery. And the concept of never to enslave another human being. There's an amazing group in Philadelphia that does a special Seder. We're going to do it, I got to talk to Emmanuel more. We're going to try and do it at UMI, that not only discusses the freedom of the Jewish slaves from Egypt, but also the African slaves, and what's going on with slavery today, and the LGBT community, and what's going on with that. And it talks about freedom, because that's what that story is about. It doesn't really matter if there was a Moses, does it? How does that story enlighten us? If we look at the story just as, oh, this is a historical fact, and we get rigid about it, then you kind of miss the meaning of it. I would say Bob Marley has a better idea of the meaning of that story than many Orthodox Jews do. But that's just my opinion. So anyway, there comes a flood. Noah gets out of it with the ark. And there's a lot to be learned there. I'm not going to go deeply on that one. He has 3 sons. Does anybody remember the name of those sons? What's that?
Ham, Shem, and Japheth.
Perfect. Right.
Oh, good.
Say it loud.
Ham, Shem, and Japheth.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
And so, when we say the Semitic tradition, it comes from that lineage of Shem, right? So you have Shem is the son of Noah, and he has 2 brothers. And Shem we look at as the good son. And it's kind of portrayed that way in the Torah. So Shem has a great-grandson named Eber. They are considered the mystical fathers of Hebrew, Israeli, Jewish mysticism. And they had a school, like we have at UMI, only they were much better, called the School of Shem and Eber. Again, there was no organized religion at this time. Believe me, I have a lot of students that struggle with that. There was no organized religion at this time. This is Shem and Eber. It's like a scientific spirituality that's happening. They're experiencing sounds, these sounds of the Hebrew alphabet in their meditation, and then they're seeing stars, and they're seeing unity, and they're transcending, and they're experiencing the divine within themselves and within other people. So they had this school, they didn't limit the school to their people of their own blood or their own skin color or their own whatever. They had a school, and that school, many people studied there. So, I'm assuming that nobody wants to get into dates and all that, because these dates are not for sure anyway. I did write some of them down. You can Google it. I do have a handout too. So Shem and Eber have this school. Eber is the great grandson of Shem. So this Semitic. So what does Shem mean in Hebrew? You guys don't answer. Name. Right? Hashem means the name. Eber is the root of Hebrew. Okay? Eber, being the root of Hebrew, also means those who cross over. So there was a river, and the Hebrews crossed over the Euphrates River. But it was more from a mystical point of view. When we meditate, for those of you here who have learned meditation from me, we use Hebrew letters and combinations of Hebrew letters to transcend, right? And remember, I draw this line, draw this upside down pyramid, right? Where I say, this is the conscious thinking level. This is the subconscious thinking level. And down here we have being. There's no thinking here. It's beyond mind. It's transcendent. Scientists today would call it the unified field. A really great scientist I recommend you YouTube is Dr. John Hagelin. He graduated from Harvard. He's a physicist, and I'm the worst speller. John Hagelin, Hagelin. If you Google unified field, John Hagelin, you'll get it. John will get you. I think. So he's great. I actually knew him, and he's just an amazing guy. So, in the tradition that Semitic mysticism comes from, there's this idea of Ein Sof, which is the same idea as unified field. What it is Ein Sof means without end. It's without beginning, without end. It's the absolute. So everything from there is relative, meaning that it has a beginning and an end. Sadly, all of us have a beginning and an end. But within us, in our mystical belief, in this tradition, lies this consciousness that is Ein Sof, it's divine. And that has no beginning and end. And the same theory is in the Vedic tradition. When Krishna said to Arjuna, in the Mahabharata, he said, Arjuna, there was never a time where you didn't exist, and there will not be a future time when you cease to exist. Now, he didn't mean his physical body or his brain. He meant that divine consciousness that's within him. So that's the same in our tradition. So what am I getting at with Shem and Eber? I'm getting at that Shem really means name, and Eber is the root of Hebrew. And we use those names and letters to transcend the conscious thinking level through the subconscious into this peaceful, blissful state of absolute nothingness. Some of you have experienced that. So what I'm saying is another possibility as to whether Shem and Eber even existed is that the Kabbalists, maybe in the 12th century, realized that through Hebrew letters, sounds of Hebrew names, so you have Shem and Eber, we can transcend. So this is the school of Shem and Eber, meaning the school of name, Hebrew name. So where does Hebrew come from? Hebrew comes from Eber. So it's still not a religion. There's still no Jewish. Okay? What it is Shem and Eber. It's a language. It sounds. Right? And let me qualify that. These sounds we know, even in another language, there's similar sounds. So the idea is not so much the way the Hebrew alphabet looks, because that's changed over time. It's the sounds, just like the mantras in the Veda, that allow us to transcend. So Shem and Eber, their offspring go crazy in the Near East, in the whole area of Mesopotamia, and there's a descendant of Eber's by the name of Terah. So we're getting to Abraham. But I want to do a couple of handouts first. So these are maps. To pass that around. I'm taking one for myself. And I'm going to talk about. Pass that around too. So, exhibit number 1.
Here, as long as it's read it.
Maybe better at this than as a real teacher, not a fake teacher.
Take one and pass it
So everybody have those maps? Those 2 maps?
Are you guys getting them over there?
Oh, maybe 2 more, 1 each.
Okay. 2.
Okay, great.
There's 2 more, but I don't think we can get to them. So, one of the good things and bad things about not being structured, right? The good thing is there's no rigidity and tight and all that. The bad thing is everyone does what's right in their own eyes and comes up with wild things, right? So, according to the Torah, I talked about the Torah and the Tanakh, but there's also these oral traditions that we call the Midrash and Talmud that were eventually written. A lot of them were written, some of them redacted. So it's complicated. It's much wider than I'm describing. But it's known in these oral traditions that a lot of these descendants were now taking the mystical, scientific, spiritual teaching that Shem and Eber, and according to these traditions, they lived a really long time. They lived through generations. And most people say that Shem lived over 600 years and taught throughout that time, which leads me to believe that it's likely Shem really meant name rather than one person, and it was a school that was passed down, right? So, this mysticism that we're talking about is very meditative, contemplative, involved with nature, but still in our tradition, monotheistic. So if you want to say Jewish mysticism is the Kabbalah, right? It's a monotheistic form of mysticism. But that's a general term. So let me say this. It does not mean that we did not recognize God in all things. That's what I just told you, the unified field, Ein Sof, in everything. It's in all of creation. The difference is we recognize Ein Sof in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the trees and the planets, and this guy they call Jesus. And we love them, and we see God in them. But we don't think of any one of those things as God. So when the Jews are waiting for a Messiah, they're not thinking the Messiah is God. They're just thinking the Messiah is a representative of God who's going to create peace on the earth, on the planet. Right. So, and that's not to say that, I'm not suggesting to any Christians that I don't think maybe Jesus was the Messiah. The philosophy that came out of that I'll discuss in one of the latter lessons, which is a sort of one guy equals two kind of messiahs. The suffering Messiah, and then the Messiah that comes to create peace. Right? So most Jews didn't think of him being two kind of guys like that. They think when the Messiah comes, boom, world peace, heaven on earth. Right? But the Messiah concept isn't even in the Torah. So that's a whole other question to ponder. There's nowhere in the first 5 books of the Tanakh or the Old Testament that it says, and the Messiah will come. Anyway, I'm off track. So these maps, we got to Abraham now, right? So, Terah is a descendant of Shem and Eber. So now we do have what's called the Hebrew people. So people are grouped into that category in the Middle East now. There's Canaanites and all kind of other ites, like Amalekites and Canaanites and all kind of ites. And there's the Hebrews. The Hebrews are Semitic. They come from Shem, and they're descendants of Eber, right? So now we have Hebrews. Terah, and by the way, they all adapted different, they weren't all strict to what Shem taught, according to the Midrashic tradition. And Terah was Abraham's father. And he was, on this map, you see down here, you see where it says Ur of the Chaldeans? That's where he lived, on the other side of the Euphrates River. But if you look at the other map, well, that map is Iraq. So Abraham was born in Iraq, in a town that was called Ur. Well, that's possible. So, he's born here. His father is a Hebrew, he's a Hebrew, but his father is an idol worshiper. So I started talking about that a little bit. So what we're saying is, not that we don't believe that God is in everything, like almost pantheistic in a sense, but we don't create an idol and then worship it. And the reason for that isn't that, the concept is there with the Judaism, that there's this God on the throne who's jealous and has a big stick, and when you don't love him only, he smacks you in the face. That's there. But the real mystical reason, the problem with idol worship, is it gets you stuck in your consciousness. If you believe that this is God, then your consciousness is stuck here. And it doesn't just relate to physical things. If you believe money is God, or whatever, you can pick. You get stuck. Sex, anything. They're all thinking about you now, Harry. When Harry met Sally, it's coming to life. So, yeah, but he's right. Any of those things.
That's a kind of worship.
Right. So, any one of those things, coming from an Israeli, any one of those things you can get stuck on, right? But when you believe, that the divine is absolute, without beginning and without end, you can't create it, but you must surrender internally to experience it. there's no stuckness. You're not getting stuck in any one place. So the notion of the mysticism of Shem and Eber in the Hebrews, which is the Jewish mysticism, is that you're not going to get stuck. Not that we don't believe in teachers and masters, even. And our master is our guide. But we don't worship the master. Because we don't want to be stuck. He's a person, he's a man. And then you run into problems, I mean, I remember Maharishi ran into all kinds of problems with Mia Farrow, and Beatles, and Rishikesh. He never did anything wrong. I can promise you he was an enlightened master. But when people look at you as God, and you're human, you're bound to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. So that's where the differences were. So Terah was not only an idol worshiper, but he made idols, according to the Torah. So Terah takes this trip way after Abraham, and there's an arrow there on your little map, and he goes to northern Syria, to Haran. So when they get to Haran, Abraham, his son, is feeling a yearning to study with Shem and Eber. Now there's all kinds of stories, midrashic stories about how this happens. I'm not going to get into them. They're fun. You don't know which one is real. All we know is that, according to legend, Abraham when he was young, wanted to study in the tents or the caves of Shem and Eber. So he comes down. So now where is the tents of caves of Shem and Eber? Well, I've meditated in the cave of Shem and Eber, but I don't know if it's the real cave. It's in Sfat, which is in northern Israel. I felt an amazing vibe there. But that could be just because I thought there should be an amazing vibe there, or because so many people have gone there to meditate there that they created an amazing vibe there. It doesn't matter what it is. Some stories have the cave of Shem and Eber still being in Syria, but anyway, it's coming down from Haran down towards Canaan. So Israel at the time was called Canaan, occupied by the Canaanites. So you had like Babylon on the Mesopotamian side, and Canaan over by the Mediterranean there. So you can see that on the map. So he makes this loop. Now going back to the mystical side and the story, allegory side of things, the way I like to look at these things, a lot of the mystics and my teachers would say Abraham's journey represented the journey of consciousness that we take as people as we grow into higher states of consciousness. In our tradition, there's 32 higher states of consciousness. The 32 paths of wisdom, netivot in Hebrew. Okay, so they're saying, and that's often shown as a picture of a man. I was going to pass this out, but I had second thoughts. It's too complicated. It's got all these names on it that I'd have to explain. But, yeah. Yeah? All right, I'll pass that. Really, I don't try not to get all confused by it. Basically, this idea is that you start out on the left side, on the judgment side. So you're born and you're growing up and you're learning things and you're trying to learn the difference between right and wrong. And you're on a now journey through higher consciousness, right? And that journey, this left, middle, and right sides to this whole idea of creation. So Ein Sof becomes, it emanates, this energy that's absolute emanates, like an amplifier emanates sound, or a light bulb emanates light. The first part of the four worlds is the emanation part. I'm not making this stuff up, it's really Jewish cosmology. Emanation part stuff. Then there's the creation. Emanation turns into creation. Creation turns into form. actual form. The creation is sort of like the architectural part of this. So it emanates, and then an architect says, whoa, this is what it could be. And then formation is, this is what it is. It starts happening. And then the happening becomes action. So these worlds are the four worlds from Ein Sof emanating. So through these four worlds, the light of the divine light becomes, in the world of formation and action, something called the Sephirot, or the Tree of Life. So if you Googled Kabbalism, right, that would come up, the Tree of Life, in various pictures. Some of them have a body on it, some of them don't. But it talks about what I'll call the finest relative. So if Ein Sof is the absolute, as emanation begins, we have the finest relative. So now there's order, right? There's math. David loves math. I don't. But now order starts to happen. We have all of a sudden this emanation order. So there has to be, there's a beginning, there's another one, there's two. You go into an Italian restaurant, you know that there's an order. You first have appetizers, then you have the fish, then you have the chicken, and then there's dessert, all that. So there's an order. First, pasta. So this order happens, and the finest relative are described in these terms. Hakma, which means wisdom, Binah, which means understanding, Chesed, mercy, these things, right? This is the heart of Jewish mysticism, the experience of those things. When I teach UMI meditation, I'm teaching what's called Abulafian meditation, Abulafian mysticism. It does not meditate on these characteristics and these things. We just meditate on the letters and surrender and transcend. Then these things come alive automatically within us. In Lorian Kabbalism, just to tell you, they do meditate on the tree of life flavors, meaning wisdom, understanding, mercy. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a different form. It's more of a mindfulness form. Okay. So now, we see, what I was getting at is, you see this almost like a person. So in the mystical tradition, Abraham's journey may not have taken place, but what it means is, it starts out from the left part of the Sephirot, and maybe we're judgmental or experience judgment, severity, but once we transcend to Ein Sof, which is at the top of Syria over here, then we experience on the right side mercy and wisdom and kindness and compassion and love and these things, right? So this little loop looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost. That is Abraham's journey. He finally winds up in Canaan, which is now called Israel. So I realize you guys are getting tired already. So I'm gonna move to sending out the next two handouts. So Abraham has a wife. He gets married. What's her name? By the way, Abraham wasn't called Abraham. Sarah wasn't called Abraham right away. He was Abram, which means, Abram means like high father. Maybe he was smoking weed.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just a high father, like an exalted father. When he became Abraham, it meant the father of many, of multitudes. All right? So we're going to eventually get to Judaism, I promise, but not in this class. So now we have Abraham. So in these two handouts, we have Abraham's lineage. Okay? And then in the second handout, I have Jacob's sons. Because this is what we're following through to eventually get to the structured religion that is Judaism. So, Abram becomes Abraham. Let me say this, Abraham was really a nomad. So he's doing all this traveling, right? That's a lot of traveling when you don't have cars and jeeps and stuff. You're talking about camels, and you have the sheep with you, and goats. So he's growing. Abraham is growing. He goes to the caves of Shem and Eber first, before he makes his trip down to Canaan. And he learns all these meditative practices, and he gains higher consciousness. He goes back to his dad's house and says, "Dad, get rid of these idols." His father says, "No, this is our bread and butter." So Abraham crushes the idols and leaves his father. And him and Sarah go on this nomadic journey, which eventually takes them to the land of Canaan, the land that is now called Israel. Okay. So the place that Abraham spends most of his time in this land is called Hebron. Still there, very dangerous place in the West Bank. I've been there, scary, a lot of tension. But he was buried there, along with the other patriarchs and matriarchs, except for Rachel, who was buried primarily. Anyway, I don't think I should go any further other than saying, if you look at these two handouts, you'll see where we're going and the descendants of Abraham. So who are the two sons of Abraham that made all this fuss that we now have in the Middle East? Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
Okay? So for the Jewish people, for the Hebrews, we follow our lineage through Isaac. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the patriarchs. For the other Semitic people, Arab people, Islamic people, they follow lineage through Ishmael. So this is the beginning of the divide. And we're half, it's the saddest story, that we're killing each other and we're really half brothers, sisters. So, anyway, I think it'd be good if I pick up from there next time. And what I'd like to do is just bring this all the way to modern day Israel and what's going on there and what it is, rather than keep talking. With those handouts and what I said, I hope that this was worthwhile for you to come to hear. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have or discussions or anything. But the main thing, whether it's allegory, metaphor, whatever religion you are of, there's always a way to look at these things. When you look more deeply at them, it's amazing how they open up things in your mind and allow us the ability to transform our lives. You think of these people as nomads and traveling, and they would say that Abraham's tent was open on all sides. So he always brought in people to his knowledge and his teaching. And I think that's what this whole thing, and even this little thing that we're doing here in Jamestown, when you think about it, we all come from various different beliefs and ideas and families, and we're really one family. And if we were to say, okay, maybe there was some crazy anti-Semitic Trump kind of guy who wanted everybody out of Jamestown, and we had to get together and we had to leave. We had to go 500 miles from here. Imagine what we'd learn about each other in that trip, and what an opportunity for consciousness raising that would be as a people. Because it doesn't matter that we believe different things. What wouldn't matter is that we had the intention or the will to love one another and get along through this. We could disagree. That wouldn't matter. But if we had the intention to love one another and get along, we would make it to them through that journey together. So we have lots of little journeys, and I think what Rainbow's doing here is really great. I look forward to coming and hearing you guys tell me your stories and your things. And so we'll have another one of these classes when it's appropriate after the holidays.
What do you suggest? Is there anything, any route we can take between now and the next session?
Yeah. I suggest you come and learn how to meditate. Shameless self-promotion.
I'll do it.
Doesn't cost anything. But no, I'm available all the time. I teach one-on-one.
It's
It's in the Barcade.
It's beautiful.
So contact me and I'll do that. But as far as reading material, there's lots of it. Depends on how thick you want to get into weeds. Like there's a book by Pedersen called Israel that talks about this nomadic movement and how they were in clans, and the clans had all these different facets, and then they turned into tribes, and how it all sort of organically happened. That book is great, but it's 2 volumes. There's not a lot of good stuff. Kabbalism has the worst books. I mean, there's one good one that's called Kabbalah and Consciousness by Alan Afterman, which you can get through Amazon. I like that book a lot.
Do you see the name of the guy that you wanted us to, John Hagel?
John Hagel. I'm going to guess, all right? I still like Mark Twain.
Say his name.
Google it.
Dr. John. How do you spell John? J-O-H-N.
Very well. It's easier.
Yeah, H-A-G. Hagel.
H-A-G-L-A-N.
And then do a little correct.
But if you do unified field theory, it will end his name. You can't go wrong. Okay.
I have a question about, so you were saying like the monotheism or whatever, and that there's there are no false idols or whatever, one God, all this stuff. So, but then you were saying that in the interpretation of maybe it was written by one person, but there's different names for the different energies of a one God.
That's totally possible.
So I was just wondering if there's that non-dual Hinduism thing that you maybe didn't like. Is there in
Very
that
possible.
same-
Totally get that. This is my transformation. This is my circuitous path. So I think what Cooper's saying is, what I didn't like in the puja ceremony may well be there in Kabbalism. And I think he might be right. Doesn't matter to me anymore. One way or 2 ways, 3 ways, doesn't matter to me. But, yeah, and I don't mean to suggest, in fact, I fully support the Transcendental Meditation movement. It's a Vedic tradition. I think it's great. In fact, what was the writer's name? David Lynch is doing great stuff with kids and TM. I mean, it's a little expensive, and this Hebrew letter stuff all resonates with me for obvious reasons, and it works the same. And it's your Jim.
Is Om a Hebrew letter?
Okay, so Om is 2 Hebrew letters. It's a Vav with a dot on the top, which is an O vowel, and it's a Mem. So yes, we actually use this in our mindfulness meditation movements that I teach. Okay, Om.
Could you touch on the concept of the world tree in relation to the Jewish or this back history that you brought up, and maybe give a little more background or info on that?
I think I'll be doing that in the next session. If that's okay.
Okay, so I'm just a little unsure about just the term Jewish mysticism. Is this interchangeable with the religion? Is it referring to the meditation practices? Like, what is
Well,
that
so these
exactly?
words, first of all of these words are just imperfect ways to describe experiences. Anything, even Ein Sof. So somebody way back when had an experience of this infinity within themselves. And now they're trying to teach, they want, the natural feeling you have when you have that is to share it. Now you're trying to share it, and you're like, how can I explain this? Jewish mysticism evolved from mystical experiences, and I'm saying from the school of Shemin Eber. The word Jewish came about from the tribe of Judah. And I'm going to explain that in the next session, when I explain Jacob and the 12 tribes, and how they came about in the land of Canaan, and how that all came to be. Okay? So don't get stuck on words. It's really not about words. It's not even about concepts. It's about experience. But this is interesting stuff because, you know, our history, even as a country, and words are bandied about, come from this particular history. And again, I'm saying I want to go deep in one direction, but you could go wide because there are various theories. So Kabbalism is what would be called, so if you Google Kabbalism, I guarantee you, somewhere in the Wikipedia it's going to say Jewish mysticism. But what it really means is received tradition. So what there was Kabbals. So sadly, I have to say, at some point within the Hebrew Jewish religion and mysticism, it became a thought, an overriding thought, that the mystical side should be kept private, should be kept secret. And it wasn't for people, ordinary people. It was just for very learned people. Like you had to know the Torah inside and out before you could be given your Hebrew letter to meditate on, or be taught about the Sephirot. So, Kabbals were created, just like you would think of a Kabbal. And it means really received tradition. So at one point, I became a part of a circle of people doing this meditation practice. And when I wanted to become a teacher, they said, okay, now you're in the holy tradition. You can initiate people. Here's how you give them these letters. This is what you do. So it's sort of like that whole, thing around it. And I think the Vedic tradition was better at spreading the mystical meditation part of it. Whereas in our tradition, we were more about, the 10 Commandments. Actually, there's 613 commandments. It's called the Halakha. And, it's like that stuff. And I'm not saying that stuff is bad. Don't get me wrong. I do some of it. But what I'm saying is that what's first, the cart or the horse? Or, I'm thinking now that if you meditate first and you experience light and love within yourself, it's natural to love your neighbor. You don't have to tell me to love my neighbor. Well, it depends on the neighbor. No.
What's real virtue?
What's the Sephirot?
So the Sephirot are the finest relatives. So you have the absolute, which is the Ein Sof, which is just whatever. In Hinduism, Brahma, right? In the Farsi tradition. And then the first emanation, creation, all of that begins to happen from Ein Sof. The first flavors of those things are the Sephirot, the Sephirah. And they have, Hebrew names, and their means like wisdom, mercy, justice, those things. Again, all of these terms are imperfect expressions of enlightened people trying to share their enlightenment. And what pieces of this are historical fact, even in the next couple lessons, when we get more into the world of action, the tribes of Israel and Judah and Judaism and all that, what is historical fact and what is allegory or metaphor is something that you wrestle with and you come up with on your own. For sure, I don't have any desire to make anyone think like me.
Well, it's,
I mean, in this. No, I want my wife to think like me all the time. But I mean, in this concept. Any other questions or? Start over. None.
Second set.
I wanted to say an extra thanks to Sal for taping this, especially for Adam. I think I might have said it, but Adam and Corey and Remo were the idea behind, impetus behind it. He couldn't make it, so I was a little bummed about that. Now we'll be able to.
guilt. He's bummed, Adam.
Can you edit that part out? Sal?
Which part? This
Can you edit that last part?
Well, thank you, Bob.
From Israel's birthday today, so I want to sing happy birthday to her. We have another cake. Cake's free. So come get it.